people that have talked about this already, but it was never given with any fact. It was the conspiracy theorist type stance. And I really wasn't sure whether to believe it or not. So I decided to look into it myself. So first I'm going to present the relationship between 5G and the immune system, which essentially, I'm just going to make a statement right now that I'm going to prove it. But essentially, 5G rapes the immune system. All right. I'm just going to say it. No offense intended. The point being that it is that harsh and it is that dramatic and it's that damaging.
Hello there, Sam Fisher. That's a bit drastic, aren't it? Eh? You've just heard from a guy called Dr. Rashid Bashar. He's a medical doctor, XCR doctor, now runs the Centre for Advanced Medicine with a guy called Dr. Bruce Lipton in America, who's the father of, founder of epigenetics, which is the study of outside forces on genes. And you're going to hear more from him during this video. Also from another guy whose name escapes me. In a TED Talk, he's a PhD in engineering, wireless communications expert, currently at Berkeley. And I'll put his name in the description below as soon as I can remember what he's called. And they're two of the most unexpected people you would think would be against 5G. But once they started looking into it, they realised that it's not really a good thing. Lastly, there's a third guy that you're going to hear from, a guy called Barry Trowett. He's Dr. Barry Trowett, sorry. He's a physicist, wireless and microwaves expert, and also a microwaves weapons expert. He's ex-Ministry of Defence, ex-MI5, and has an exemplary military record. Out of everyone I've listened to and everyone whose papers that I've read on the subject of 5G, this guy is more qualified than any of them to talk about it. So, I'm going to leave you in their capable hands, and I'll chime in every now and again. Okay, I'll see you in a bit.
It started with the iPhone, and then tablet computing, ubiquitous Wi-Fi, the smart meter and the smart home, and wearable tech, and now the Internet of Things. If we could imagine how this would look, it would actually look like this. This is an artist's rendition of what Wi-Fi in our public spaces looks like. We could actually hear what microwave radiation sounds like with a device like this. So if anybody would like to hear what their smartphone or their smartwatch sounds like, come and see me at the end, and I can show you. But how does this affect our bodies? That's the question I want to ask, because this exponential rise in microwave radiation can have effects, and that's what scientists and medical doctors around the world are now saying, especially when it comes to children, because they're going to be affected by this their entire lives. But today I also want to share a few solutions. I want to give everyone here things that you can do in your own lives in order to reduce this type of exposure. So I actually got into this topic about 5 years ago. Before then, I was a young technology enthusiast. I always used my smartphone and Wi-Fi. I've worked in Silicon Valley and have a master's degree in engineering. So if anyone had told me that wireless technology could have health effects, I would have thought they're crazy. So if you're thinking that right now, I can relate. But this all changed for me over the period of about 1 week. And I started to experience headaches, ringing in the ears, insomnia, and a fatigue and brain fog that I'd never experienced before. And I shared this with a colleague at work, and she said, the exact same thing happened to her husband when a wireless smart meter was installed in their home. So I went home that evening, and I checked downstairs, and sure enough, we had a bank of wireless smart meters installed right below our bedroom in San Francisco. So this started me on a journey to learn as much about this topic as I possibly could. I now have a website about this, and I'm contacted by people all around the world every day who are experiencing the exact same things. It can be when they have a wireless smart meter installed, or a new Wi-Fi router, or even a cell tower placed across the street from their home. These are the common symptoms that people start to experience. This is actually from a published paper on the health effects of wireless smart meters. So, just here in the Bay Area, I'm in touch with dozens of people who've had their lives changed by this. Medical doctors, high school principals, teachers and students, IT professionals, and even entrepreneurs. These are people who had a normal life, and then over a short period of time, went to where they could no longer work, where they could no longer go to an office. Some of them actually have had to move out of their homes because they can't be in an environment which is normal now for most people. I've been in touch with people around the world who've become homeless because of this. There's many people that's actually happened to. And unfortunately, I know of people who've actually taken their lives because there's essentially no place they can go, and this is something that society does not yet recognize. My own life has been tremendously changed by this. After that first exposure to wireless smart meters, now I can no longer be in an environment with strong Wi-Fi for very long. So I can't go to my work the way I used to be able to. Most environments are now essentially toxic to me. So even finding a safe place to live has become very difficult. Imagine not being able to live in an apartment building where everyone has Wi-Fi, or to be able to live next to a cell tower.
5G has a higher frequency. You will need a transmitter every 150 meters, which is virtually on every lamppost or every tree. 5G has been shown in very recent history to be particularly more dangerous, even in areas where it has been set up. In one report around a transmitter, they found around 100 birds had died. In another transmitter, they found cattle that had died. It is a particularly dangerous frequency because of its high resonance. What I'm saying is that mathematically it is so complex that nobody can actually predict the harm it's going to cause. Even the people who have made it can't predict the harm it's going to cause. Mathematically, it is a nightmare. One thing that interests me is that the upper end of the 5G scale is actually so close to the new weapons frequency. There is a new weapon which its nickname is the Growler. It can be sent from aeroplanes or vehicles. And the Growler is used to destroy the neurological and physiological systems in the body very, very quickly.
This is used for crowd control.
Crowd control, or if you have an enemy, or so in one hand you have the industry saying that, well, they won't say it's safe, they will say we have not found any harm. But on the other hand, it is being used as a weapon, and of course the two are incompatible. You can't have something which you can show to pregnant women or children and allow them to use it, and in another use it for crowd control. And to say that the powers are different is absolute rubbish, because with all microwaves, a long low dose can be equally, even more dangerous than a short high dose. So 5G is a nightmare. Already we are getting instances of I think 70% less production of fruit, 60% decrease in insects that pollinate trees. It is suspected of already killing cattle and birds, as I've said. But the main problem, as I see it, and it isn't 5G, it is with the other Gs as well, but 5G is going to be much worse because it's going to blend in with the Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is a known, proven, and used weapons frequency.
Advent of 5G takes this up in order of magnitude times 3 or 4. We're going from 50 cycle, 60 cycle hertz to over 10 megahertz up to 300 gigahertz. So this is like exponentially greater electromagnetic fields that we're creating. These are radio frequency electromagnetic fields that we're creating. So prior to this, it was extremely low frequencies, what they called ELF fields. But now these fields have gone up to from, as I said, 50 to 60 hertz, maybe up to 900 hertz with some of the mobile devices that we held in our hands, now to an order of magnitude of 10 megahertz to 300 gigahertz. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about 5G. So it's important to understand that the difference between 3 and 4G to 5G is not just one generational, what you would think. It's a leap and bound. It's like going from a 2-dimensional image to a 5-dimensional image. It's massively different. It's not even close to being the same thing. All right. However, the attractive component of 5G dwarfed the actual concerns that we should have had about the rollout of 5G from a health perspective, from a wellness perspective, from a perspective of what does it do to the human physiology or to any physiology, to any living physiology. And that was virtually ignored. The World Health Organization basically took a back stance on this. All right. So what does actually the science show us? Now, there has been talk about 5G and the health risks, as I said before. But this particular article was very interesting because it talked about a war between technology and human beings. So this article was written in May of 2019, and it talked about 180 scientists and doctors in almost 40 countries that are warning the world about the 5G health risks. These scientists responded to Resolution 1815 of the Council of Europe and basically stated that the scientists and these doctors were against the rollout of 5G. And I will just read this to you so that you are aware of what it says. We, the undersigned scientists, recommend a moratorium on the rollout of the 5th generation 5G until potential hazards for human health and the environment have been fully investigated by scientists independent from the industry. The reason they said this was because the studies that have been done were riddled with conflict of interest because the scientists that were doing these studies were vested with the technology companies. 5G will substantially increase exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields, which is also, the acronym is RF-EMF for radio frequency electromagnetic fields, and has been proven to be harmful for humans and the environment. Okay. Now, this author goes on to say, if you're not alarmed about 5G radiation dangers, you should be. And we'll talk about a little bit more about this, but I want to point out that this was 180 scientists and doctors in almost 40 countries, but that number significantly increases over the next 6 months, and we'll show you that. Now, 5G cancer is actually a thing, okay? The cities of Brussels and Geneva have blocked trials and banned upgrades to 5G out of this concern. So there are countries in the world that have banned it, that have said, no, we're not going to have 5G allowed. We are not going to tolerate it. Now, again, as I mentioned before, 4G and 5G, the difference is in the terms of gigahertz, all right? 5G comprises technology that promises radio millimeter bands in the 30 to 300 gigahertz, whereas 4G tops out around 6 gigahertz. Now that's 4G at the most advanced level. Most of the 4G devices were only at around 900 hertz. That's about where, so you're talking about up to about maybe 1 gigahertz. Okay. Maybe that was the highest. This is going up, 5G is going up to 30 to 300 gigahertz, 60 to 120 times faster internet, which again is really, really exciting to think about how much convenience it would be. But how many people are going to be enthusiastic about that convenience if it's associated and correlated with cancer and is statistically significant data that has been extrapolated from these studies to show the direct correlation? I don't think anybody would be. All right. So we never worried whether or not our drive time radio shows would fry our brains with the 2, 3, and 4Gs. But with 5Gs, it becomes an issue.
I'll leave the weapons out for a minute. The problem that, as I see it, for Poland and countries that have huge forests, it is known and documented that, especially with 5G added into Wi-Fi, but with Wi-Fi on its own, 5G is going to make this worse. It is known and documented that in 3 generations of humans, only 1 in 8 children can expect to be born healthy. 1 in 8, if at all. It is published that with plants and animals, depending on the reproductive cycle, some species will be totally extinct within 5 generations. That's been published. So what you have is the total destruction and loss of Poland, without a shadow of a doubt. That is published, and it is provable. And one of the other main problems, which is going to carry on, people underestimate how clever and how useful trees are. Now, trees communicate with each other via their roots within the soil. They join roots, they help feed each other. If one tree cannot get enough sugars, they will help photosynthesize the others. They also help control the microorganisms in the soil. Trees also take out a lot of carbon dioxide from the air, and trees do not like microwaves. And you will find the resistance of trees going down as soon as you microwave them. But the other thing is, and not a lot of people appreciate this, if you have inland fish or fish in huge lakes or inland fish, around 70% of a fish is tree. And people find that hard to believe because the trees shred their leaves, they go into the streams, they are acted on by microorganisms, they wash down into the water, the microorganisms feed other microorganisms, you start the food web, the fish feed off that, and in fact 70% of a fish is actually tree, from a tree, through the food web. Now, if you destroy the trees, you destroy the fish and the ground soil. But it gets even worse. When you have long, hot summers, trees produce a chemical of molecules which go into the sky. These molecules blend with water vapor in the air, which form larger molecules. And they actually form very whispery, small, loose-fitting clouds. But a whole forest will do this all at once. How the trees communicate isn't known. But it is known, and it is measured, that on very hot days, to protect themselves from overheating, trees will release these molecules and you will get whispery clouds above your forests and that provides shade which keeps the trees alive. The trees take out the carbon dioxide. Now, if you destroy the trees or you make the trees sick, you get extra carbon dioxide going into the water. The water has microorganisms on its own called coccolithopores. And coccolithopores produce a chemical called dimethyl sulfide. The dimethyl sulfide goes into the air and is the only substance on the planet known which can be used in cloud formation. So if you follow the cycle, if you make the trees sick, which you will do, then you kill your fish, you kill the coccolithopores, who are very low intolerant to carbon dioxide in water because it makes it acid. They are already in the process of dying and changing the cloud structure. So just by affecting the trees that people think are just trees, you actually destroy the fish, you destroy the ocean microbiology, and you change the planet's weather. And there is one more piece of information on this. It has been found and published. And I did have it explained to me by a professor sitting where you were a few months ago, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. But bacterium and viruses seem to thrive on microwaves. So they become resistant to all the treatment to try and kill them. They seem to think, hello, we're in danger, we will multiply more quickly. And he did tell me the process, but it wasn't within my knowledge to understand it. But bacteria thrive. So this is why when you microwave plants and trees, and you have huge...
Now, did you hear what Mr. Troy said there? Keep that in mind for part 2. That'll become very important. Anyway, let's carry on, shall we?
Forests in Poland. Within the span of a few generations, you are going to lose your forests, your fish, your plants, your pollinating insects, and your children. And it is proven, and I have the documents, you can expect only 1 in 8 children to be born healthy. And I'm sorry it's such a long answer, but 5G is going to exacerbate this, make it much, much worse, because the trigger for this was really Wi-Fi. When Wi-Fi came out, 1999, 375 huge companies used the Wi-Fi frequency, which is a known weapons frequency. That was really the trigger. 5G is going to make this worse.
Well, so basically this is a war, a weapon of war, as you've pointed out. It cannot be compatible with a healthy lifestyle, so that's the first point. The second point about the trees, of course, is extremely alarming. I suddenly got the message from Einstein, Albert Einstein, who I believe said if we lose the bee population, the planet will be in very serious trouble. I immediately make a correlation there between what you're saying about the insect population.
I have twice presented. We have a festival here. We have a festival here, the Glastonbury Festival. I have twice presented the environmental lecture to the Glastonbury Festival. One of them was on what I've already been talking about. The other was on bees. My bee lecture is on the memory stick, which if you can download it, my bee lecture is on there. And yes, it is well documented, well understood that you will lose the bees from microwaves.
So this has been carefully avoided, talking about microwaves in relation to bees. We've heard about pesticides, we've heard about many things, but they've always steered clear of suggesting that microwaves might play a part in this. One other anecdotal piece of information concerning trees is that we've heard very recently that in England, where they are attempting to introduce the first experimental use of 5G on lampposts in cities like Gateshead, for instance, and I understand in Bournemouth, possibly other places, they're actually clearing trees. I think possibly in Sheffield, actually. They're actually clearing trees from towns because they might interrupt the signal.
That is correct, and they're also finding that insects are leaving the area. And in fact, it's not just bees, and for any scientists watching this, I'm talking about the cryptochrome pigment with the double electron absorption navigation system that insects, arthropods have, commonly known as creepy crawlies to most people, all flying insects, and they are responsible for pollinating 80% of the world's food, and we are destroying them in droves.
You know, the information so extreme, so profound, so absolutely vital that
This is this is actually a proposed cell tower here in Berkeley. The residents have actually stopped it for now, but most churches and most schools now have cell towers on them. And so it exposes the people around them and, of course, the students who go to those schools. This is a cell tower in San Francisco. That brown thimble on top of the telephone pole is a cell tower. And these are being placed every couple blocks. So you could have an amazing home, and then one week a company can come and put a cell tower right outside your window. So this is something that's happening throughout the Bay Area, and it's going to be happening throughout the United States. So it makes it so that people like myself have a hard time finding a place to live, but it also is ratcheting up the exposure of the entire population. So you might be asking, perhaps some people are being injured by this, but if you're not feeling it, it's probably not that big of a deal. And I think that's a very common experience. But it's not as simple as saying that just a few unfortunate people are being affected by this. Because what the science shows is that we're all affected on some level, whether we can feel it or not. And the reason is because essentially our bodies are electric. Every cell in our body communicates using tiny electric signals. It's how our nervous system operates. So to think that we could put an exponential amount of microwave radiation into our environment and not feel effects is simply false. To illustrate this, I actually had many friends come to me when I started to experience this, and they would say, "Jeremy, are you sure you aren't making this up in your head?" And I thought this too myself at the beginning. But then a year or two later, they would come to me and they'd say, "You won't believe it, but now I'm feeling pain in my arm when I use my cell phone, or when I put it to the head, or when a new Wi-Fi router is installed." So this is something where when people have more of an exposure, more people are being affected. And it's not just headaches and insomnia. It's much more serious things, such as infertility, DNA damage, and eventually cancer. This is what the research is starting to show. And you don't have to take my word for it. I encourage you to start researching this for yourselves. If you simply Google EMF research, this is a screenshot of what you'll find. The World Health Organization is the first link there, and they actually in 2011 came out and said this wireless technology is possibly carcinogenic. Now there's scientists around the world that say that it's most likely carcinogenic. The third link there is actually my own website. It's there because the last 5 years I've gathered research from around the world that shows that we now have enough evidence to at least take precaution when it comes to this technology.
While 4G wavelength travel along the surface of the skin, 5G millimeter waves are more insidious. 5G wavelengths are emitted, our skin will automatically absorb them. Now, it's important to mention that when you go through TSA, when you go through the airport security systems, when they take you through these devices where you raise your arm up, that is the same millimeter wave technology. That is the reason I didn't even know this at the time, but it just didn't make any sense to me. And I have never gone through one of those devices. And I fly quite frequently, sometimes as often as once a week. Now, I will tell you that I have missed 2 flights because of the pat downs, and it is a pain in the rear end, but I still refuse to do it because it just didn't make any sense to me based upon the little bit that I knew back then. I've looked at it more. I do know that taking certain supplements through there, I used to write letters for patients to be able to take their supplements through a different system. And I did know about the absorption from the skin, but what I didn't know was the significant amount of damage to the immune system that the 5G rendered. That's what I didn't know. Does 5G cause cancer? Many scientists understand microwave ovens are carcinogenic. They cause cancer. Most of these scientists also believe that these waves are mutagenic. All right. Mutagenic causes mutation. 5G will be similar to turning on your microwave. There's a good reason why hundreds of scientists are taking actions against the wireless industry. Now, let me talk to you about microwaves. We did a little study, myself and a colleague of mine who has now since passed, and his name was Dr. James Hauer, and we did a small little internal study between his clinic and my clinic to determine what the most significant cause from an energetic basis, what was the most significant contributing cause for cancer. And what we discovered was so alarming. And this was back in 2001. So this was 19 years ago we did this. And the most significant exposure, energetic exposure, for those of you that don't know, I have a 7 toxicity philosophy. And basically, if these 7 toxicities are effectively addressed, where the body is detoxed from these 7 toxicities, by definition, chronic disease cannot exist. Cancer, heart disease, it doesn't make any difference. It can't exist. We have treated patients with end-stage cancer from 93 different countries. We have treated autism and all the difficult to diagnose from all over the world. And I can tell you that we have before and after videos of patients, hundreds and hundreds of patients. In the case of autism, we've treated over 3,800 patients. And we have been able to define quantitatively that if you can eliminate these 7 toxicities, by definition, chronic disease cannot exist. Of these 7 toxicities, the 4th one is the energetic toxicities. The energetic toxicities are things such as electromagnetic radiation, ambient cell phone radiation, microwave technologies, anything that causes an effect from an energetic source on the body. We found, Dr. Harver and I found 19 years ago that the most significant adverse effect from any energetic component that a person would experience that was suffering from cancer was from microwaves. And for that reason, I have not had a microwave in my house since 2001. Actually, I'd stopped using it in 2000. So for 20 years in my house or wherever I've lived, there has never been a microwave. In the clinic that I operated, there has never been a microwave in those last 20 years. And I will not tolerate or take in any food that has been put into a microwave. In fact, my children, my 15-year-old son and my 21-year-old son, have absolutely refused to eat anything that has come out of a microwave. In fact, my son, my 15-year-old son, my youngest son, Rahan, has never known the use of a microwave. When he was 6 years old on a vacation in Hawaii, they took a burrito and they put it in the microwave and he refused to eat it. He wouldn't eat it. Because he said it was in a microwave. He just would not eat it. So that's how my kids have been raised. Now come to find out that this new 5G network that's rolling out, that is analogous to a massive microwave that's going to be all around us. Not only that, but for each tower that is a 5G tower, it can only generate enough power for anywhere between 3 to 6 homes. Some people say up to 10 homes. Compared to the 4G networks that could power hundreds of homes per tower, now we have to have multiple towers, 5G towers, per 10 houses or 5 houses, whatever it is. In other words, we have to increase the number of towers by a significant order of magnitude in order to be able to have 5G utilization worldwide. It will not be like 4G. It will be much higher frequency of towers. And then, of course, we know the amount of energy that these things are putting out with the millimeter wave on the order of magnitude of gigahertz, going from 900 hertz to 30 to 300 gigahertz. It's astronomical amounts of microwave technology now we're going to be exposed to. Going on. The wireless industry is not just building an infrastructure that provides faster downloads. It's building a global microwave oven. They said it themselves. 5G towers and mini stations are extremely dangerous because of the intensity of the technology. It will also require millions of more mini cell towers than before, potentially 1 tower per 2 to 8 houses. All right. So what I had read before was anywhere from 2 to 10. Some people said 2 to 6. So 2 to 8 houses. We don't know the exact number, but that's what they're estimating. This means that human beings' radio frequency radiation exposure will not only increase, but it will also exponentially increase within months, within a very short time frame. These towers are not only dangerous, they're lethal. And the author goes on to say it should be considered a crime against humanity. In general, radiation does one major thing to the human beings and animals. It destroys our DNA either by forcing the DNA to mutate or by killing specific groups of cells, all of which lead to cancer. Cancer is a highly mutagenic, adaptogenic process. And when a person goes into the hospital and gets an x-ray because they broke their leg or they needed to have a chest x-ray or whatever, what's happening is there is radiation being introduced into the body. That's the reason that the radiologists or the radiation techs will wear lead to protect themselves. All right. Now, this is a question I've always asked. Why is it that they use lead to protect themselves? It's so that they don't get the radiation. Well, why is the radiation bad? Because it causes DNA adducts to form, to DNA mutation to form. Why is that bad? Because then that leads to cancer. Now, when somebody has cancer, what do? We give them radiation. We give them further exposure to things that will cause DNA adducts to form and mutations to occur. So that is a fundamental reason that radiation therapy is something to me that is counterproductive and doesn't make any sense. Why it's done? Because it defies logic. Einstein said that you cannot solve a problem with the same mindset that created it. Well, this use of radiation for the treatment of cancer has not made sense to me for at least the last 20 years. Now, what are we doing? We are actually promoting through something non-medical, a technology that is going to expose our DNA to much higher levels of damage that can then lead to these DNA adducts to form and mutation to occur, which will then lead to cancer. So here's what to expect if you experience prolonged exposure to radiation. Nausea, swelling, hair loss, decreased appetite, low energy, general malaise, damaged bone marrow, damaged organs, deep depression, confusion, infections, incapacitation, and death. Okay? Pretty much things that nobody wants to experience. How do you protect yourself from 5G? Cell tower radiation health effects are real because there will be thousands of these towers and stations in every city. It will almost be impossible to avoid them. Given how addicted we are to our devices, the general public will tend toward risking life and limb to support our screen-related addictions. Now, here's the thing. Most people don't know about this. My hope is that people will learn about this and will then understand why we may want to consider a different option. But again, it's something that I've heard. I know that some people are sensitive to electromagnetic radiation. Some people are going to be sensitive to the 5Gs. But from a global standpoint, it was, again, something that it was coming out. It's part of technology. You do the best you can. You create ways to protect yourself, and there are devices out there that'll protect yourself. And if somebody's really interested in that, next Thursday, we will be doing a webinar, what you can do to protect yourself, but I'll talk about that in a few moments. All right. So there are things that you can do to protect yourself. But right now, the goal of this video is to determine if there's a correlation between 5G and coronavirus. All right. So let's go on to the next component. And this study, or this article, I should say, is actually talking whether 5G technology is bad for our health. Some experts strongly disagree that 5G is safe. All right. 5G has been designed to increase capacity and reduce latency. It will use higher frequency bandwidths right across the radio spectrum. What does 5G have to do with our health? The electromagnetic field, the field of energy that results from the electromagnetic radiation, a form of energy that occurs as a result of the flow of electricity. these electric fields are power lines operate between 50 and 60 hertz, as I mentioned earlier, and electric fields result from the flow of electricity, and the radiation that comes off of them is called electromagnetic radiation. RF EMF stands for radio frequency electromagnetic fields, include all wavelengths from 30 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. Public exposure is mostly from handheld devices such as cell phones and tablets, but these things are relatively low electromagnetic frequencies, and the biological effects are usually limited to just heating. All right. In 2011, 30 international scientists who are part of a working group of the International Agency for Research on Cancer met to assess the risk of developing cancer as a result of exposure to radiofrequency electromagnetic fields. This study was published in the Lancet Oncology. And I can show you that study if you are interested in that. In fact, we can go right here and pull that up. It's right there, actually. I'll come back to that. The team looked at 40 studies that used rats and mice. In the view of limited evidence in humans and experimental animals, the working group classified radiofrequency electromagnetic fields as possibly carcinogenic to humans. The evaluation was supported by a large majority of the working group members. All right. Now, for me, that's good enough. If it's possibly carcinogenic, I don't want to have anything to do with it. But it goes on. Dr. Leonard Hartl from the Department of Oncology at Örebro University in Sweden is an outspoken critic of the WHO's decision not to adopt the IARC's classification for radiofrequency electromagnetic frequencies as possibly carcinogenic. In the 2017, the International Journal of Oncology explained that several members of the EMF project's core group are also affiliated with the ICNIRP, an organization he describes as an industry-loyal NGO. All right. Now, there is a direct conflict of interest that if you're a scientist working for a company that's rolling out 5G or somehow related to 5G, and then they're also doing a study on the safety of 5G, there's a inherent conflict of interest there. Being a member of ICNIRP is a conflict of interest in the scientific evaluation of health hazards from radiofrequency radiation through ties to military and industry, Dr. Hartl writes. All right. So that's not surprising. Of course, anybody that's got that conflict of interest should recuse themselves, but they did not recuse themselves from the study. They still participated and said that it was safe. Regardless, it was still assessed to be possibly carcinogenic, but the World Health Organization refused to accept that mandate and has said that it's safe, generally regarded as safe. Dr. Agostino Ciaula from the Division of the Internal Medicine at the Hospital of Bisceglie in Italy reviewed the latest studies, specifically revolving around radiofrequency electromagnetic fields in humans, animals, and microbes. He wrote, evidences about the biological properties of radiofrequency electromagnetic fields are progressively accumulating, and although they are in some cases still preliminary or controversial, clearly point to the existence of multi-level interactions between high-frequency electromagnetic fields and biological systems, and to the possibility of oncologic and non-oncologic, mainly reproductive, metabolic, neurologic, and microbiologic effects. Biological effects have also been recorded at exposure levels below the regulatory limits, leading to growing doubt about the real safety of the currency employed by ICNIRP standards. Now, look, guys, I can keep on going on and on with this, but the National Toxicology Program study by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services looked at high-level exposures at 900 megahertz. They found clear evidence of tumors in the hearts of male rats, some evidence of tumors in the brains of male rats, and some evidence of tumors in the adrenal glands of male rats. In the Journal of the Environmental Research Group, a group of researchers from Cesare Malatoni Cancer Research Center in Bologna, Italy, found an increase in tumors in the heart in rats exposed to RF EMFs equivalent to 1.8 gigahertz base station. Remember, we're looking at 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz with the rollout of 5G. So they found this at relatively low levels at 1.8 gigahertz, and we're talking about a significant order of magnitude higher. There's certainly evidence that ties radiofrequency electromagnetic fields exposure to a small increase in the risk of developing certain cancers and other adverse health outcomes. That's if you look at it from a very conservative stance. If you look at it from an aggressive stance, it's a very high correlation. However, the only recommendation that's been made by the Food and Drug Administration is cutting down how much time we spend on our cell phones. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommended limiting the time that kids and teenagers spend on mobile devices. And that was basically it. That was the end of it. Now, what does this have to do with coronavirus? Well, it has a lot to do with coronavirus. We have no reason to believe 5G is safe. FCC adopted these limits based largely on research from the 1980s and preponderance of peer-reviewed research. More than 500 studies have found harmful biologic health effects from exposure to radio frequencies at intensities too low to cause significant heating. So there's been a lot of studies done on this. Then it goes on. Remember, before I showed you 180 scientists. Now that number goes up to 240 scientists have published peer-reviewed research on the biologic and health effects of non-ionizing electromagnetic fields, signed by the International EMF Scientists Appeal, which calls for stronger exposure limits. These scientists have published more than 2,000 papers and letters on EMFs in professional journals. Appeal arguably constitutes the majority of the experts on the effects of non-ionizing radiation. Now, I talked about the millimeters waves before, and I'm not going to repeat it again, but basically short-term exposure to these millimeter waves, the same stuff that you go through the security checkpoints at TSA, at the airports, short-term exposure can have adverse physiological effects in the peripheral nervous system, the immune system, the cardiovascular system. The research also suggests that long-term exposure may pose health risks to the skin, including melanoma, the eyes, which is ocular melanoma, and the testes, testicular sterility or testicular cancer. 5G is a new technology. There's no research on health effects, so we are flying blind, to quote a U.S. senator. However, we have considerable evidence that the harmful effects of 2G and 3G, little is known with the effects of 4G, a 10-year-old technology, because governments have remained remiss in funding this research. And now we're going to go from 900 hertz to 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz. And we know that already studies have been done to show a correlation at just 1.8 gigahertz with all sorts of different types of cancer. Again, why am I talking about this when we should be talking about coronavirus? Well, I was curious. I want to establish first how damaging 5G is for you, since I wasn't aware of a lot of this literature, and by delving into this.
I hope the audience is going to listen to this film at least twice in order to be able to take in the level of significance that you're describing. I understand that 5G operates on millimeter wave frequencies, very, very fast, short ones. You will describe that more accurately, I'm sure. Can 5G be used to specifically and even accurately target individuals, for instance, or cars or houses or even rooms within a house? In other words, that means, could it be used as a psychotronic weapon for population control?
Yes, it could, but you wouldn't need to, because it would do it anyway. The problem is all living matter, every single cell in every single living thing on the planet produces its own little waves around it. And all of the, it's difficult for people to understand, but every single cell in our body can communicate with every other cell in the body. The whole body is one big chatterbox of components talking to each other. And in an adult, you have around 10,500 biological structures which all talk to each other. And you produce a wave or a field, I won't get too technical here, around your body. There are people who claim to be able to see this field, and I believe they can. Yeah, and if anybody wants to see or demonstrate this field, it's very easy. All living things have it. Just take two ordinary eggs. Take two ordinary eggs, put them on a shiny surface, and put them end to end. If they stick, turn one around, and you'll find that they will fly apart. Because the fields will either attract or repel each other like magnets. And every living thing has this field. Microwaves will come in and disrupt this field. That is one effect. The other effect, which is what I was involved in the Cold War, were the pulse frequencies. Now, you have clocks in your body, generally regulated by the hypothalamus, but you have clocks that monitor different parts of your body and regulate hormones and all sorts of other things. You also have structures, tiny molecule structures, which vibrate. Now, when microwaves go in, the pulse frequencies, they can change these clocks, and they can change the rate that the hormones or anything is moving in the body. They can also, the word is resonance, they can also cause resonance in other parts of the body. Now, you have circadian resonant frequencies, and you have cyclotronic resonant frequencies. And you can grow in and out of these. So when an organ, let's say like the heart, is growing, when it is a particular size, it will meet the microwaves or the pulse frequencies, and it's like if you have a spinning top and then you just give it a little nudge and a little nudge, or you're on a swing and then you just lift your legs and you keep the swing going, and then you can make it go higher and higher. Microwaves can do this to the clocks and to the organs, and unbalance them and make them malfunction. Now, you can grow into this and you can grow out as the organ or the body or the cell changes size. And it is known to date that women have 13 different circadian resonant frequencies than men. So you could have a lady sitting in a room saying, I'm getting funny hearing, or I'm picking up voices, or I'm getting an irregular heartbeat, or something's going wrong. And the man could be saying, don't be stupid, go and see a doctor. Whereas in fact, she is picking up, or it could be a child, and the most susceptible human forms is the embryo within the first 8 weeks of pregnancy. That is very susceptible. So when I was talking to spies in the Cold War, for the years I did it, the spies that were using microwaves as weapons, I made a list of probably 30 or 40 frequencies that were known and used in the Cold War, mostly by the Soviets and the Americans, although we did as well, to cause cancer, neurological illnesses, drive people to commit suicide, breast cancer, that sort of thing. I had a list of 30 or 40 pulse frequencies which I collected from spies that would cause probably 50 or 60 neurological and physiological illnesses to the point of death. And several people have published this, the illnesses. I published the pulse frequencies. Today, I think the list stands at 750 pulse frequencies. 5G will make that much, much more. But it's not 750 where you get this or this. It is 750 factorial mathematically. That means you can have the effects of number 1 multiplied by the effects of number 2, number 3, right through 750. And some people who are electrosensitive and are having this affect them instantly, the symptoms are exactly the same as lead arsenide poisoning. You really just want to lay down and die. That is it. You really don't have the energy to move. And it is possible to change neurological structures and make people suicidal. And this is done both deliberately and accidentally. You will find around some transmitters, depending on what pulse frequencies they use, and they keep them secret, depending on what pulse frequencies, you will find mass suicides around some transmitters, 8 different types of cancers around others. You will find lots of varying symptoms, which are all known and predicted. But for the industry, for whatever reason, it is worth I think it now stands at it's 17, I was told $17 trillion that it's now worth. And it's worth losing up to 60% of the population for this amount of money. And it's as simple as that, really. And I have a document that actually says that people must be deceived to and the wording is people must really be deceived, although they've used slightly different wording, by saying you select a safety level that cannot be challenged in court when people die. And the actual wording is to protect industrial output, profit. So the whole list of illnesses, birth defects, stillbirths, miscarriages, they're all there. And the reason for all of this, and it was classified top secret and still is, but I have the documents, is protect industrial output. And all of this is to protect industry.
Isn't this regulated? And this is one of the most interesting things I've found. The Federal Communications Commission is who is supposed to be regulating wireless technology. But if you look at the regulations, they're almost 20 years old. So that means our most advanced technology is using science that's at least 20 years old. But not only that, they're based on a concept which is nearly 50 years old, which says if microwave radiation does not heat us, then it can't possibly hurt us. But there's now hundreds of studies that show that this is false. So how is it that we have a regulatory body that's not protecting the public? Well, like many issues, like many public health issues in our country, you end up having industry influencing the regulatory body. And that's what's happening here. So you have a revolving door between the wireless lobby and the FCC Commission. So that's what's happening. Plus, the science is heavily influenced by industry funding. This is a study by Dr. Henry Lai. He looked at 326 studies based on the biological effects of cell phone radiation. He found that about half of the studies showed effects and half didn't. That's pretty normal for this type of research. But what he found that was interesting was that if you looked at who funded the studies, 70% of the independent studies showed effects, and only 32% of the industry-funded studies showed effects. So you see that there's an influence in money on this topic. Just like many other topics, tobacco is another one where essentially the industry funded science that was going to show their products were safe. So that's the bad news. And now,
so what you've just seen is a small example of what's going on with 5G, what the actual evidence behind why we shouldn't have it. Like I said, there's countless countries that are now banning it, countless US states that are banning it. all for good reason. And those reasons they've just given. In the description below, I'll put in countless more information, websites, to papers, to videos, just so I can have a look at your information yourself even, all the info that I've actually sort of collated over the years. Part 2 will be up in the next couple of days. That is going to go into the effects on viruses. And that's going to be a good one. And engineered epidemics. A possibility of engineered epidemics using microwave technology. And I'll have more experts. More people, Dan, to blow your shitty little argument out of the water. Anyway, to all you lot, especially you, Simon, Dan, I knew you won't do the research, lad. 4 hours. These people's credentials blow your, not even got your degree in astronomy yet, out of the water, pal. You're not that smart, son. Anyway, see you in a bit.